I thought I would begin my words today with a bit of a lecture. This is something that I teach at University of Southern California about mindfulness, yes? And there's quite a bit of scientific research around mindfulness these days, a lot. It's actually a whole bunch in the last 10 years or so. That's really profound and important. And one bit of that research is the effect of mindfulness on the duration of our emotions. So there's a great passage from Scripture that says, "Do not let the sun set on your anger." Good line, huh? And I think what that points to is that you get angry about something or upset in any way, and it's intense, and it takes time for it to dissipate, doesn't it? And so what the Scripture is saying is try to speed up that process a bit, right? So that it's gone by the time the sun goes down, so you don't carry it with you into your dreams, yes? And let it mess up your sleep cycle. Down-to-earth practical advice for us all. Well, it turns out that mindfulness helps your anger and your shame and your frustration and your upset fade before sunset. Practicing mindfulness reduces the time it takes for the intensity of an emotion to dissipate. So before mindfulness, right? There's intensity in your emotion, something happens, you're very upset, and then slowly it goes down, and maybe it's still there by sunset, and maybe it's there the next day, and so on and so on and so on. Long tail to this curve of intensity over time. But if we are mindful of our emotions as they are happening, if we watch our emotional reactions, they're still there. We still have emotions. Mindfulness does not make them go away. But by looking at them with open eyes within, without judgment, letting go of opinions, if we look at our emotions as we're having them in real time, we will experience very often a much more rapid decline of the intensity in a shorter period of time. Yes, a steeper curve, right? So that we can follow the advice of Scripture to not let the sun set on our anger. So there's science behind the Bible. Think of it. And one of those emotions that's intense, is shame. Shame, embarrassment, whatever word you want to use. Years ago, I was studying Spanish in Morelia, Michoacan in Mexico, and I realized that besides my class that I was taking every day for, I think, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, I needed practice with folks. So I went around seeking that out. We call it intercambio. I speak English, you learn some English. You speak Spanish, I learn some Spanish, back and forth. So I was seeking that out. And among other opportunities for intercambio, I wound up I was about 32 years old at the time, but I fell in with a group of teenagers. And I think what they really wanted was for me to buy them sodas, right? So they were hustling me. But I realized cheap at the price, you know? By the way, the peso was devaluing every day while I was there. Every week I had more money. It was very strange. How does that work, where you have more money every week? It's like backwards. Anyway, so I go, what the hey, this is cheap. So I'd buy these kids sodas, and then they'd talk to me, and I picked up a lot of vernacular. Well, one day, the boys in the group were getting very chistoso with the girls, you know, making jokes, telling dirty jokes, right? And I was catching on to the jokes, you know, getting there with my Spanish. And this one boy, you know, said a joke, and it was dirty. And anyway, this girl started turning pink, and she was, you know, flustered. And I go, "Oh, estás embarazada?" Thinking that embarazada means embarrassment. Oh no, they all started howling, just howling with laughter, because embarazada means pregnant. So then the girl really turned red. And her emotion lasted, I think, for a long time. It was a long tail on that one. It was pretty extreme. Well, the boys thought that was wildly entertaining too, so yeah. In order to learn a foreign language, you have to be willing to suffer some shame, yes? Quite a bit of embarrassment, yeah. Oh, by the way, the proper word is vergüenza, so I learned it that day. Yeah, in order to learn Spanish, you have to endure quite a bit of vergüenza, embarrassment. And the question is, what do we do? So shame, embarrassment, it's gonna happen. We're gonna do stuff that embarrasses us, or should embarrass us, I should say. Then what? What do we do with the shame? Do we hang on to it with a long tail? Or do we face it squarely and let the tail be shorter, but deal with it? Deal with whatever it was that caused the shame. Make restitution, rectification. In my career as a pastor, I have never had to advertise that part of my job is being a confessor, right? Receiving the confessions of people. They figure it out, or they just assume that they can spill their guts on me. And man, stories I could tell if I could tell, but of course I can't because, you know, that's part of the deal is confidentiality. But I've heard many expressions of shame and guilt and embarrassment and regret from people over the years. And it's been intense and an eye-opener to the human condition, suffice it to say. One person in particular who poured out his soul to me was a man who had been unfaithful to his wife. And he didn't tell her about it. She figured it out. They always do, by the way. Hello, out there. They figure it out. They always figure it out, just about always. Anyway, somehow he couldn't figure that out, that it was gonna get figured out. Anyhow, she confronted him. It was devastating. It was terrible. He was ashamed. He was very ashamed. But when he came to me, what he was suffering from really was too long of a tail on the shame. Of course, he should never forget what he did and its consequences. Of course, the restitution would take a lifetime, probably. But wallowing and groveling in it was not serving him or his wife, with whom he was in a process of reconciliation. It was not healthy for him to be hanging on to the intense shame. It was actually getting in the way of the reconciliation. So that was the focus of our conversations. He had admitted his wrong. He was working on reconciliation actively, but he had to get to a different relationship with the shame in order to be able to move forward. Love is attention. You've heard that from me before. Probably you haven't heard this line from me before yet, and that is that sin is inattention. Sin is inattention. It's what you do when you aren't watching the road, right? When you're not looking ahead to what's around the bend. That's inattention, and that's the consequences of that are problematic. You know, in religious terms, we call it sin. But the instant we pay attention to the fact that we lost our attention, at that instant that we are aware of our, and mindful, back to this topic, mindful of our inattention, the instant we're there, poof, forgiveness, on the spot. That's it. That's what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is when you wake up from your inattention and pay attention again. And look at what happened and deal with it and face it and act to make restitution, but not to wallow in it, to let the tail be short so that you have the energy and the focus to make good on whatever bad happened. So there's no reason for shame to stick to us, no reason to have it hold us down, no reason for shame to cloud our vision, because that's what it does. These intense emotions that we have of all kinds, they prevent us from seeing what's going on. They get in the way of our vision and our awareness and our consciousness. There's no reason to believe in shame's hallucinations, because it makes you hallucinate in a way. It makes you see stuff that's not there. It gets in the way of a clear vision, particularly a clear vision of how to make things right after you've done wrong. So, all of us have some kind of shame or embarrassment inside. It's a particularly intense and insidious kind of emotion because we are social creatures, right? We depend on each other. We exist in a web of relationships. That's absolutely life essential for us. So when we do something shameful, that threatens our social existence, right? It's scary, it's hard. So it's just something we're wired to worry about and to cling to and to get stuck within us. So to be awake to the insidious, sneaky shame that's eating at us, the embarrassment that's bothering us within, that long tail of this emotion, over time, by looking at it clearly, then we can catch it, and then we can release it. It's like trout fishing, right? Like fly fishing. You cast out the line, you catch the fish, you admire it, you unhook it, you throw it back in the stream. That's what mindfulness is. That's what contemplative Christian practice is all about, right? Catch and release. Let it float away so that we can rise up again, so we can jump for joy, etc. Oh, another thing to think about with this intensity and time thing. It's like this applies to good experiences too, to good emotions. Now you might say, don't you want them to last? Why would you want the tail to be short on joy, on a surprise emotion of joy? Well, maybe it's so that you have a quick, joyful response. It tails out quickly, and then you're ready for the next joyful experience, right? The next surprise that comes along. You're not just stuck on the wonderful thing that just happened. You're ready for the next thing to happen that gives you joy and wonder and awe. So it works both ways. When we're paying attention, we have activated our perception, our ability to see what is real more fully. The other thing we activate when we're paying attention is our imaginations. And I think, one big, huge reason to come to church is to come here to get the switch flipped on your imaginations. Yeah? To cultivate our imaginations in a positive way. And we have this super rich religious tradition that's full of stories and poetry and complexity and myth, and it's rich, rich, rich. All this beautiful music that Joan plays, the artistry of worship, the history of art and music in our church, all of it feeds and and enriches and activates the imagination. It's not just something for us to consume. Oh, believe this doctrine. That gets in the way. Not about doctrines. It's about actively engaging our imaginations with the richness of our tradition. Because if our imaginations are activated, then we can imagine better the consequences of choices that we make. Yeah? And you imagine what's going to happen. You know, like this, my guy who got into an affair, right? Well, what happened there is that his imagination got short-circuited, didn't it? He could imagine his way into the affair, but he was not imaginative enough to think about and to imagine what it would be like afterwards. Which I think is about 90% of the problem with infidelity in marriages. It's just a failure of imagination. Yeah. Not visualizing what could happen with that course of action. I would say that, at the risk of getting political here, I would say that the main problem with Donald Trump, let's just use names, it's not that he's shameless. That's bad. I mean, a little dash of shame, that would be a great thing for Donald J. Trump and for America. But I would say the main problem with Donald J. Trump is not that he's shameless. It's that he just doesn't have an imagination. He lacks imagination. And that's scary, actually, because you need to be able to imagine the courses of action that would result in different outcomes to make good decisions to run a company or a business or anything else, or a marriage for that matter. Yeah? So that's the problem, is the failure of imagination. So I would like to think of our church as being a school of imagination. We are Imagineers, yes? Like Disney or something. That's part of our work here. In Christianity, a lot of churches, you'll find prayers of confession and absolution. Yeah? Many churches have that. I'm not into that because I think we need a break from it. I think the church has done a terrific job over the years of making people feel guilty, right? We got so hung up on sin and punishment, so busy, begging a supernatural entity to give us forgiveness. But I would say there's a more humane and divine way to approach our failings and our sins and our need for reconciliation. And that is to pay attention, right? God-like attention. To see with the eyes of God, without judgment, without opinions, without preconceptions, and look at our urges, our compulsions, look at the ways we screw up, be loving observers of all of that, and then activate our imaginations so that we stay out of trouble and we do good naturally, as a natural outcome, a natural consequence of being awake, of being attentive, of being mindful. It's worth a good hard look at how much shame has hold on our lives. To look at it and recognize that this emotion lurks within us all at some level. We shove it into the background. We let that long tail persist of experiencing it. We let it haunt us. But it's time to get out from under this haunting. It's time to stop it from twisting our perceptions and circumscribing our horizons. Hanging on to shame is useless. We think we deserve it, so we hold on to it, but it just gets in the way after a very short period of time. There's a better way to motivate ourselves to do the right thing. Instead of being ashamed, let's just be conscious. Conscious with the eyes of God, the eyes of pure love, that make shame evaporate on contact. Yes? Conscious enough to see what actions harm and what actions help. Conscious enough to be imaginative to see what could happen if we did this versus that. Conscious enough to trust that doing the right thing is attractive enough for us to inspire us to do it. So I pray that for us all, we use our Christian practice to shorten the tail on this curve of intensity and time. To shorten the tail, to not let shame, much less anger, persist past sundown. Amen.